Hey everyone, it is your friend Joseph Craven here with the numbers game on Running Out the Clock Sports, the Week 12 numbers game. Whew. This, of course, is the little series that we do here where I just recap all the statistics, the poll movement players of the week from the SEC out of the week previous. There's no opinion here. There's just a quick rundown on all the information in case you didn't pay close attention to all the games. There were a lot of really random, really, weird matchups. SEC teams playing a lot of non-conference games. So it's easy to lose some of the statistics in the midst of all that. So this is your rundown. This is the breakdown of what happened. I am not joined by my puppy co-host Radar O'Reilly today because she decided that she'd rather sit in the living room and chew on toys than hang out with me for some reason as I record. So whatever. It is a lovely little drizzly Monday morning here as I'm sitting here recording on a holiday week off of work, rivalry week. I still can't say it. Here in the SEC, and man, it's kind of feeling like nap weather after all this is said and done. So let's quickly speed through what happened this past week, week 12, and because there are a lot of games, so let's just throw a lot of numbers at you very quickly. Number one, Alabama pulled away in the third quarter from the Citadel to win 50-17. That, of course, is after it was tied 10-10 at halftime. Alabama came out and dropped 27 third quarter points. The Crimson Tide opened up the scoring with a touchdown pass from Tua Tagovailoa to Jalen Waddle, 21 yards away towards the end of the first quarter. After that, the Citadel running back Dante Smith had a 45-yard touchdown run on the Crimson Tide to tie things up. 2 field goals made it 10-10 at the half, and after that, of course, it was all Crimson Tide. Another Tua to Waddle touchdown pass opened up the third quarter in scoring. Anthony Jennings returned a fumble 18 yards for another Crimson Tide score. Irv Smith Jr. had a 68-yard touchdown pass, and then Tagovailoa added one rushing touchdown from a yard out to end the third quarter. 37-10 was the final score there. From then on out, that pretty much sealed everything there. So let's look at the statistics for the Tide. As mentioned, quarterback Tagovailoa went 18 of 22 for 340 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts came in, attempted 4 passes, completing 3 of them for 31 yards and 1 touchdown. On the ground, Damian Harris had 83 rushing yards on 7 attempts. Najee Harris, 51 rushing yards on 4 attempts. Tagovailoa, 4 rushing attempts for 37 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground. Senior running back Ronnie Clark getting in and running the ball 3 times for 14 yards. That is not a name that you see called very much in Alabama football games, primarily because, I guess there is, 30 running backs on their roster? I feel like Alabama has, just looking at it right now, on the ESPN breakdown of their roster, Alabama has 6 quarterbacks on the roster and 8 running backs. 8 running backs on a college football roster. That's very interesting. Ronnie Clark's a 6'2", 230-pound back, by the way, getting a little bit of playing time this senior. Brian Robinson Jr. had 2 carries for only 4 yards, but 1 touchdown, 1 goal line touchdown there. And Josh Jacobs also saw a couple of carries, but for only 3 yards. Through the air, even though Waddle had the 2 touchdown passes or the 2 receptions, it actually was Henry Ruggs III who led the way in yardage, 6 catches for 114 yards. Waddle did have 6 catches as well for 90 yards. 2 of those were touchdown receptions. Star receiver Jerry Jeudy had 6 catches, but for only 77 yards, no scores. He did not lead the Tide in receiving in what feels like, the only time that has ever happened. Irv Smith Jr., their tight end, had that 168-yard touchdown reception. That's a way to make a reception count right there. Jacobs added 1 15-yard catch out of the backfield, and there was one final touchdown reception to wide receiver Devonta Smith from 7 yards away. The Citadel, by the way, only attempted 2 passes on the day and did not complete either of them. However, shout out to Dante Smith, their running back, with 2 touchdown scores one from 45 yards away in the second quarter, one from 44 yards away in the fourth quarter. If there ever was someone who deserves credit and isn't getting it, nominee that gets overlooked, it was Dante Smith of the Citadel, for sure. Florida defeated Idaho 63-10 in a big rematch there of the 2014 game that didn't happen. Florida opened the scoring very early, a 26-yard interception return, pick six, literally on the first play of the game. Just 6 seconds into the game, Florida's on the board. They didn't slow down after that. It was 28-0 at the end of the first quarter, 49-0 at the end of the second. Idaho got a few points by the end of the game, but at that point, as mentioned, it was 63-10 as a final, including that final Florida touchdown was a Ventrell Miller 82-yard pick six as well. Felipe Franks went 19 of 27 passing for 274 yards and 3 touchdowns. Wow, that is some efficiency. I like that. Emory Jones, the second-string quarterback, saw a lot of him. 12 of 16 passing the ball for 125 yards and also 2 touchdowns. Damian Pierce led the way on the ground with 13 rushing attempts for 77 yards. LaMichael Pirine had 6 rushing attempts for 34. Felipe Franks added 2 carries for 21 yards and a touchdown on the ground. And the other rushing touchdown on the day actually came by wide receiver Josh Hammond, who took a wide receiver run 21 yards into the end zone for a score. Interestingly enough, there are 2 names that you will not see very often in the offensive box score. A freshman, Iverson Clement, running back out of Mount Holly, New Jersey, rushed the ball 3 times for 12 yards. And then my personal favorite, linebacker R.J. Raymond, 2 carries for 16 yards. I guess when you've got that happening, when you're up 63-3 at one point, you kind of just let whoever wants to carry the ball and lead the way there. Interesting receiving statistics as well for the Gators. Keontae Lewis led the way through the air, 3 catches for 57 yards. Kadarius Toney, big-time playmaker, had 6 catches for 54 yards. It'd be very interesting to see how Toney is used from here on out, because he seems to match a lot of what Mullen likes to use in terms of that Percy Harvin-esque type of role, can run or catch. Tight end Kyle Pitts had one 52-yard touchdown reception. Wide receiver Tyree Cleveland, 3 catches for 51 yards, 1 touchdown as well. Van Jefferson, 3 catches for 35 yards and a touchdown. And Josh Hammond added 3 catches for 30 yards and 1 receiving touchdown as well. Josh Hammond, 1 rushing touchdown, 1 receiving touchdown for the Gators. Kentucky defeated Middle Tennessee State 34-23. This was a pretty interesting game. Kentucky jumped out early, up 17-0 in the first quarter before Middle Tennessee was able to get 10 points in the second. Ended up being 24-10 at halftime. And then Middle Tennessee made a little bit of a push. Kentucky got 1 more touchdown early in the third, but then Middle Tennessee, a score late in the third quarter and another score early in the fourth to bring it to 31-23, looking like maybe they could make another push. But Kentucky able to hold off in the final 13 minutes of the game. 1 more field goal pushed it to 34-23 as a final score for the Wildcats. Still having one of their better seasons in recent memory. Let's look at their statistics on the day. Quarterback Terry Wilson went 10 of 14 for 121 yards and 1 passing touchdown. Big Benny Snell had his back to form, had his traditional 26 carries for 116 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Asim Rose, their other running back, added 7 carries for 48 yards. Wilson, the quarterback, 5 carries for 27 yards. And breakout wide receiver Lynn Bowden Jr. had 1 carry for 12 yards. Tight end C.J. Conrad, 4 catches for 51 yards, 1 touchdown. And the other tight end for the Wildcats, Justin Rigg, had 1 29-yard reception. But beyond that, 3 more passes went to Isaiah Epps for 24 yards on those 3 receptions. Lynn Bowden Jr. only 1 catch for 9 yards. And Taven Richardson is the only other Wildcat to register 1 catch for 8 yards. In conference play, Mississippi State handled Arkansas 52-6. That game was 3-0 Bulldogs at the end of the first quarter before Nick Fitzgerald got a 2-yard run for a touchdown, bring it up to 10-0. Third string running back Nick Gibson, seen a significant amount of playing time, got a stumbling 8-yard touchdown run to push the score to 17-0. And at that point, there was not much Arkansas could do. They got a field goal before half, but in the third quarter, it was all Nick Fitzgerald. 34-yard touchdown pass from Fitzgerald to Justin Johnson. 4-yard from Fitzgerald to Keith Mixon, 15-yard from Fitzgerald to Osiris Mitchell, and it was suddenly 38-6 in the end of the third quarter. Austin Williams caught a 19-yard pass for a touchdown from Fitzgerald early in the fourth quarter, and that was pretty much the end of the day. The fourth quarter was all Austin Williams. Backup quarterback Keaton Thompson came in and threw a 33-yard strike to Williams. 52-6 ended up being that final. On the losing side for the Razorbacks, Ty Story, their quarterback, went 16-27, 137 yards, 1 interception. We actually saw a handful of other players attempt passes here. 2 of them were quarterbacks. Connor Noland attempted 3 passes, only completing 2 and for only 8 yards. And along with that, John Stephen Jones came into the game and attempted 3 passes for only 1 reception and 5 yards. A wide receiver, Devion Warren, attempted 1 pass as well on a particular play, and it was incomplete. As it was mentioned during the broadcast, John Stephen Jones is, of course, the grandson of Arkansas legend and Dallas Cowboys owner, Jerry Jones. And his father, Stephen Jones, also played football for the Razorbacks. So it's just family legacy for John Stephen Jones. Pretty cool to see that right there. On the ground, Rakeem the Dream Boyd had 14 carries for 84 yards. Decent outing for him against a stout Mississippi State defense. Devwah Wally, actually, we saw some more of him in this game after a little absence there. 4 carries for 16 yards. Not a whole lot else on the ground, though, for the Razorbacks. Wide receiver Deion Stewart rushed the ball 1 time for 7 yards, and Malik Williams, another running back, had 3 rushing attempts but only 2 yards on the day. The Michael Petway, their wide receiver, had 4 catches for 83 yards to be probably their best offensive weapon. Tight end Cheyenne O'Grady had 2 catches for 24 yards. Wide receiver Michael Woods added 3 catches for 15. Deion Stewart, 6 catches, 13 yards. Rakeem Boyd had 1 8-yard catch. And Jordan Jones, another wide receiver, 2 catches, only 5 yards. On the other side of the ball, quarterback Nick Fitzgerald for the Bulldogs went 9 of 14. He had a 2 of 7 start before completing a bunch of passes in the third, especially a lot of touchdown passes to bring that total up. But only 127 yards, but 4 passing touchdowns for him. Keaton Thompson came in as the backup, went 3 of 4 for 61 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown, of course, being a solid 30-something yards. On the ground, the Bulldogs were led by senior running back Aries Williams, seeing significant playing time for the first time basically all season. 15 carries for 104 yards on senior day, getting to go out strong there. Along with him, quarterback Nick Fitzgerald added 14 carries for 85 rushing yards and a touchdown. The first time in a while we've really seen the running game look like it did under Dan Mullen all those years with Nick Fitzgerald and Aries Williams. But with that, the Nick and Nick show was going strong. Nick Gibson added 9 carries for 48 yards and a touchdown. Probably going to see more playing time moving forward, you would expect, going into next season. Gibson will. I believe he is a junior this year. And a lot of people, he's kind of the forgotten man in that backfield, but at 5'11", 215, he's a balanced running back and was a pretty highly... I think he was like a 4-star recruit or something, so not a bad player coming out of high school. Anyway, another senior, though, Dontavian Lee from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. The big boy, 6'1", 230, carried the ball 7 times for 38 yards. Keaton Thompson, the quarterback, added 2 carries for 12 yards. Through the air, Justin Johnson, the tight end, had 3 catches for 59 yards and a touchdown. Austin Williams, a wide receiver that had been off and on kind of quiet this season. He is just a freshman. But, sometimes running great routes, sometimes non-existent on the day. He had himself a day. 2 catches, 52 yards, both of those catches, 2 touchdowns. Osiris Mitchell, 2 catches for 21 yards and a touchdown. Devontae Jones had 1 catch out of the tight end position for 17 yards. I'm sorry, Dante Jones, not Devontae Jones. Stephen Guidry, 1 catch for 15 yards, and Keith Mixon added 1 4-yard touchdown reception for the Bulldogs. Missouri got up big on Tennessee and ended up winning 50-17. Couple field goals for the Missouri Tigers in the first quarter before they opened it up in the second. It was Ty Chandler for the Volunteers who actually got on the board with a touchdown first early in the second to make it 7-6. But then in the final 8 minutes of the first half, Missouri got a rushing touchdown from Tyler Beatty, a 21-yard field goal, a touchdown pass from Drew Lock to Dominique Jacinto, and then another pass from Drew Lock to Jonathan Johnson to go up 26-10 at the half. Ty Chandler for the Volunteers got another rushing touchdown to open up the third quarter to bring it back to 26-17, but then it was all Tigers. A Larry Roundtree touchdown run, a Joshua Bledsoe fumble return for a touchdown in the third quarter, put it at 40-17. Tucker McCann had a 39-yard field goal, and then late in the game, Sami Bakare got a 2-yard run for the Tigers to go up 50-17. Let's look at the losing side of things. Quarterback Keller Chris seeing most of the playing time. 7 of 19 passing for 172 yards, 2 interceptions. Jarrett Guarantano only attempted 2 passes on the day, completing neither. Guarantano, of course, went out with an injury in the second quarter, and then Chris ended up playing the rest of the game. Guarantano being the key to much of the success the Volunteers have had this season, and it showed in this particular game as well. Ty Chandler, that running back for the Volunteers, had 14 carries for 82 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Tim Jordan carried the ball 6 times for 18 yards. Chris credited with 2 rushing yards as well. Through the air, the Volunteers were led by Marquez Callaway, their go-to receiving target. 2 catches for 98 yards. No scores, though. And Callaway as well had to go out of that game with another injury, along with his quarterback. Also through the air, though, you had Juwan Jennings, wide receiver, 141-yard reception. Josh Palmer had 2 catches for 23 yards. And Jordan Murphy, 2 catches for 11 yards. On the winning side, however, Drew Lock went 21 of 30 passing for 257 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. His storied career continues. Larry Roundtree III, 26 carries. That's Benny Snell numbers right there. 135 rushing yards, 1 touchdown. Not a whole lot of Demaria Crockett in this particular game. Instead, Roundtree, when he was spelled, which only happened every now and then, he was spelled by Sami Bakare, who carried the ball 9 times for 41 yards and a touchdown, and Tyler Beatty, 6 carries, 17 yards, 1 touchdown. Locke added 16 yards on the ground, and Crockett had 3 carries for 10 yards. Through the air, we got to see more of Emmanuel Hall, the senior wide receiver who was their go-to guy before injuries kind of slowed his season down. 4 catches, 74 yards. Jonathan Johnson, their junior wide receiver, had 7 catches for 53 yards, 1 touchdown. Cam Scott, 2 catches, 48 yards. Tyler Beatty, 2 catches out of the backfield for 36 yards. Roundtree, 1 catch out of the backfield for 18 yards. And Dominique Jacinto had himself, that's a name we don't hear that much this year. He had 1 8-yard catch. He is the, quick little 5'9" freshman wide receiver for the Tigers. 1 8-yard touchdown catch. Moving along, Auburn defeated Liberty, blanked them 53-0. Important on them to try to get that shutout. The scoring happened early and often. They even in the first quarter, they even got a safety to go up 15-0 by the end of the first. It just not a whole lot to talk about there. It was just a total blowout. Let's run through the numbers. Jarrett Stidham, 12 of 18 passing, 178 yards and 2 touchdowns. 3 passing attempts were made by the backup quarterback, the sophomore out of Atlanta, Georgia, Malik Willis. He completed 2 of those 3 passes for 13 yards. Cam Martin, the guy that a lot of people thought would be the main running back this year, he led the way on the ground. 17 carries for 116 yards on the ground. Jatarvius Whitlow carried the ball 7 times for 48 yards. Sean Shivers, 6 carries, 45 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground. There's a lot of Tigers that carried the ball, so we're going to keep running through this. Asa Martin had 10 carries for 44 yards. CJ Tolbert had 6 carries for 41 yards. And quarterback Malik Willis, 2 carries, 15 yards, and 1 rushing touchdown. So good on you, Malik Willis. Seth Williams led the way through the air, 5 catches, 109 yards, 1 touchdown. Ryan Davis also had 4 catches for 40 yards. Then behind them, you had Sal Cannella, their tight end, 1 touchdown catch on 1 reception and was for 22 yards. Griffin King had 1 7-yard catch. Shedrick Jackson had 1 6-yard catch. And finally rounding it out, Anthony Schwartz, 1 4-yard catch. The Tigers putting up a lot of points without too many incredibly notable statistical categories there, which was very interesting. Texas A&M defeats a 9-win ranked opponent, undefeated in conference play, UAB, but they defeated them 41-20. How did that happen? Well, A&M took advantage of UAB mistakes very, very early on. So early, in fact, that we were 9 seconds in the game when A&M was able to strip the ball from the Blazers and return it 17 yards for a touchdown to go up 7-0. UAB did tie it up with a 9-yard touchdown pass from Tyler Johnston III to Andre Wilson. Travion Williams, though, ran the ball in 9 yards at the end of the first quarter, or with 5 minutes to go in the first quarter, to go up 14-7. A field goal and another Travion Williams touchdown in the second quarter stretched things out for the Aggies. In the third quarter, another field goal. Kellen Mond able to get on the board with a 25-yard touchdown pass to Jay Sternberger. UAB stifled that entire time, looked sloppy, played sloppy. A&M took full advantage. UAB didn't get any more points until the fourth quarter. Ended up losing 41-20. Let's look at the statistics for the Aggies. Kellen Mond went 11 of 20, 192 yards, 2 touchdowns. On the ground, Travion Williams carried the ball 20 times for 167 yards and 2 touchdowns. Mond added 38 rushing yards. Jashawn Corbin saw the ball 4 times on the ground for 31 yards. Nice averages across the board there. Williams, 8.4 yards per carry. Corbin, 7.8 yards per carry. Their stud tight end, Jay Sternberger, had 4 receptions, 85 yards, 2 touchdowns. Courtney Davis added a 37-yard reception, his lone reception on the day. Jamon Osborne had 2 catches for 26 yards. And Cameron Buckley added a 23-yard reception as well. Trevor Wood, another tight end, had 1 9-yard reception. Travion Williams, 1 8-yard reception out of the backfield as the Aggies able to beat a ranked opponent, trying to get momentum going up to that big matchup against LSU to end the season. Speaking of LSU, they defeated Rice, another Conference USA opponent, 42-10. The difference here, while UAB is undefeated in the CUSA, Rice has not won a CUSA game. In fact, they've only won 1 game all season long. Rice Owls struggling. 42-10 was that score. LSU got 14 first quarter points. They also got 14 second quarter points. It was 28-3 at halftime. LSU just worked it. Check out these numbers here. Joe Burrow went 20 of 28 for 307 yards and 2 touchdowns. Anytime you get Joe Burrow throwing for 300 yards, then you're going to win that game. Miles Brennan actually threw the ball 6 times, completed 4 passes, 65 yards. Nick Brossette on the ground, 14 carries, 69 yards, nice, 2 touchdowns. And right behind him in terms of rushing attempts with 7 attempts is Leonard Fournette. That's right, L-A-N-A-R-D, Leonard Fournette. That was my co-host asking whether or not Leonard is related to Leonard. And yes, Leonard Fournette is Leonard Fournette's younger brother, now playing for the Bayou Bengals as well. Similar thing going on there with former Alabama, now Atlanta Falcon, Calvin Ridley, and his younger brother, Kavin Ridley, who decided to go by his middle name. Kavin Ridley, spelled same way as Calvin but without an L. But now Kevin goes by Riley. So there you go. Clyde Edwards-Helaire for LSU added 5 carries for 32 yards and a rushing touchdown. Burrow had 17 yards on the ground. Their quarterback, Tay Provins, carried the ball 4 times for 13 yards. And then there's one rushing attempt credited to a cornerback, John Trey Kirkland, who rushed the ball 1 time for 4 yards. Through the air, this is very interesting. A bunch of names that we don't really get to see very much. That's the fun part of playing late season non-conference opponents. Steven Sullivan had 4 catches for 94 yards and a touchdown. He's a 6'7" junior wide receiver who we just don't really see that much. This is obviously his best game on the season. Looking back over the rest of the year, he had 2 catches for 54 yards against Southeast Louisiana in the second week of the year, 2 catches for 12 against Auburn. He did have 5 catches for 50 yards against Ole Miss. But beyond that, I mean, not a whole lot, especially the last few weeks where he had 1 catch against Georgia, 1 catch against Mississippi State, nothing against Alabama, and did not even record anything at all against Arkansas before blowing up with 94 yards and a touchdown against Rice this weekend. Foster Moreau, a 6'6" senior tight end for LSU, added 5 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown as well. Their go-to wide receiver, though, Justin Jefferson, he was still here. You can't get rid of him. He had 3 catches for 56 yards. Terrace Marshall Jr., their highly touted freshman wide receiver, had 3 catches for 48 yards. Jamar Chase, 1 catch for 45 yards. And Derek Dillon added 5 catches for 31 yards. 2 more games to get through. Here we go. We could do this. The overtime thriller between the Ole Miss Rebels and the Vanderbilt Commodores. This was a fascinating little game here. Vanderbilt able to pull that victory out 36-29. Let's look at the scoring breakdown here. A lone field goal in the first quarter. That's all we had out of Ole Miss or Vandy. 3-0 there. Ole Miss added another field goal early in the second, and then had the one of the highlights of the game, a touchdown pass from Jordan Ta'amu to A.J. Brown that went for 84 yards total when all things were said and done. Ole Miss up 13-0 at that point in time. Vandy finally able to get a field goal and then got a safety with under 4 minutes to go in the half. After they got that safety, it was 13-5. They were able to take that following drive and get their first touchdown of the game to get some more momentum. It was 13-12 heading into the intermission, with Vanderbilt getting all the momentum they needed to try to take advantage. They scored first in the second quarter. Ole Miss added 2 field goals the second half as the third quarter went on. Vanderbilt able to get one more touchdown at the end of the third, 26-19. Things get even more interesting here in the fourth. DeMarcus Lodge gets a touchdown reception to tie the game up. Then for Vandy, their kicker, Riley Guay, had to have a 44-yard field goal to take a small lead. And late in the game, Ole Miss able to drive down and with 40 seconds remaining, get a 32-yard field goal to tie it up, take it to overtime. In overtime, Kalijah Lipscomb, the star wide receiver for the Commodores, gets the touchdown reception to go up 36-29. And then if you paid attention, you would have seen that one of the strangest calls in history, A.J. Brown gets a pass in the end zone in overtime, but he lands, unclear whether he has possession. Vanderbilt defensive back ends up getting the ball away from him. They're debating, okay, is it a touchdown? Is it an interception? The referees, for whatever reason, decide to split the difference and just call it an incompletion. Not really sure what they saw or what they could have seen to make it that. But either way, heartbreaker there, as then Ole Miss unable to complete it before turning the ball over on downs. And Vanderbilt gets out of there with the victory. For Ole Miss, Jordan Ta'amu, their quarterback, went 32 of 52, 457 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And we saw a lot of their favorite freshman, Isaiah Woolard, at running back, as Scotty Phillips is still dealing with injury. Woolard had 16 carries for 107 yards. Ta'amu added 10 yards on the ground. Running back Eric Sweeney added 5 yards on 3 carries. A.J. Brown, 9 receptions for a stupid 212 yards and a touchdown, 23.6 yards per reception. anytime you got 23 yards per reception, almost 24, and you have 9 receptions, good Lord, have yourself a day, A.J. Brown. DeMarcus Lodge, 9 catches for 117 yards, 1 touchdown as well. Another freshman that they like, Elijah Moore, had 7 receptions for 52 yards. Their tight end, Dawson Knox, had a 36-yard reception in the game. And then, because this is the week where you just have a lot of names mentioned that no one ever hears from at all, Floyd Allen for the Rebels, 2 catches for 25 yards. In case you're curious, Floyd Allen had 2 catches on the season, so he doubled that up. So good for him, senior wide receiver there. Woolard added 2 catches out of the backfield for 14 yards. On the other side of things, Kyle Shermer for the Commodores, 22 of 34, passing for 191 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception on the day. And then their punter attempted a pass, Parker Tommy, spelled Thome, so it could be pronounced Thome, but his pass was incomplete, so it doesn't really matter. Running back Keyshawn Vaughn, 25 carries, 127 yards, 1 touchdown on the day. Their second leading rusher was a wide receiver, Donovan Tennyson, 2 carries for 24 yards. Behind them, Jamari Wakefield only had 3 carries for 17 yards. Kalijah Lipscomb rushed the ball 1 time for 13 yards. Their backup quarterback, Mo Hassan, had 1 9-yard carry, and Kyrie Blasingame, very quietly, 1 carry for 6 yards. Star tight end Jeremy Pinkney for the Commodores, 6 catches for 85 yards. Kalijah Lipscomb had 7 catches for 69 yards, nice, and 2 touchdowns. Behind them, spread the ball out just a little bit more. Those two obviously getting the bulk of the targets. Amir Abdur-Rahman had 1 15-yard reception. C.J. Bowler had 3 catches for 14 yards, one of those being a touchdown. Kyrie Blasingame out of the backfield, 1 13-yard reception, and Jamari Wakefield out of the backfield, 1 11-yard reception as well. In the most exciting game of the weekend, South Carolina defeated Chattanooga. I'm sorry, Ole Miss and Vandy was the most exciting game of the weekend. I don't want it to seem like I'm about to say South Carolina and Chattanooga was exciting, because it was not. 49-9 was the final score there. The Gamecocks jumped out early and jumped out often, 28-3 at halftime, 49-9, just a bunch of field goals for the Chattanooga Mocs. South Carolina handling their business. In particular, quarterback Jake Bentley. Talking about handling business. How about 25 of 29 passing for 339 yards and 4 touchdowns? Cool. So he had just as many touchdowns as he did incompletions on the game. That's not something you see very often, especially at the quarterback or at the collegiate level. His backup, Michael Scarnecchia, went 2 of 4 for 15 yards passing. And then we also saw Jay Ulrich and Dakarian Joyner, 2 other quarterbacks on the roster, 2 freshmen. Ulrich, a 6'5" passer, Joyner 6'1", 208. Ulrich had 1 of 1 passing for 9 yards. Joyner 1 of 2 passing for 1 yard. And because this is the week where we never see any names that we actually recognize in statistical categories here, the South Carolina Gamecocks on the ground were led by a freshman running back named Deshaun Fenwick. Why not? Fenwick, literally no statistics on the entire season. He gets the ball 17 times in this game, rushes for 112 yards and a touchdown. Obviously an opportunity for him to see some playing time in what I can assume without doing any research at all is a redshirt year. A.J. Turner, junior running back, carried the ball 8 times for 65 yards and a touchdown there. Another junior running back, Mon Denson, had 7 carries for 28 yards and 1 touchdown. Dakarian Joyner, the quarterback, 3 carries for 24 yards. Jay Ulrich, the other quarterback, 1 carry for 14 yards. And then Josh Vann, a wide receiver, added 1 5-yard carry as well. Through the air, Deebo Samuel finally getting to show out the way that we all wanted him to this season. He had himself 5 catches for 112 yards and a touchdown, 22.4 yards per reception. The last 2 weeks have been very good to Samuel, who has had a up and down year between injuries, inconsistent play, both by him and his quarterbacks, and all sorts of nonsense there. But 120 yards last week against Florida, 112 against Chattanooga this week. So Deebo Samuel trying to end his collegiate career well. Wide receiver Bryan Edwards had 4 catches for 69 yards. Nice. And then wide receiver Shee Smith added 4 catches for 68 yards, 1 touchdown. Running back A.J. Turner had 3 catches for 34 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. So Turner had 3 touchdowns on the day, both on the ground and through the air. So very nice play from Turner there. Chavis Dawkins, junior wide receiver for the Gamecocks, added 3 catches for 24 yards. And Josh Vann, 4 catches, 15 yards. And that is finally all of the scores that we have here. Let's run through the polls real quick, and we're going to look at the players of the week. And we're not going to do the overall statistics right now because that's just going to be too long of an episode for what we aim for with the numbers game. You know what? I knew in all of this I was going to overlook one of them. And sure enough, I did. I didn't go over Georgia and UMass. So we need to go over Georgia and UMass real quick. Wow. Knew something was going to get lost here. Georgia Bulldogs won 66-27 against the UMass Minutemen. And this is important because you're going to hear Justin Fields' name quite a bit in all of this. He played a lot, and he did quite a bit. Here are the statistics for the Georgia Bulldogs. Fields led the way through the air, 5 of 8 passing for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. However, it was still starting quarterback Jake Fromm who... these passing numbers are just silly. Okay, Jake Fromm went 5 of 5, 106 yards, 1 touchdown. And then the other quarterback for the Bulldogs, Matthew Downing, went 4 of 4 for 48 yards. So literally, you had 3 incompletions spread out between 3 different quarterbacks. Well, really not even spread out. Fields only had all the incompletions because he saw most of the playing time. Fromm and Downing went perfect through the air, and Fields was almost as perfect as you could be. Wow, just really impressive. On the ground, Fields also added 100 rushing yards on 7 carries and a touchdown. Oh my goodness, these rushing stats going to be silly. Okay, James Cook, 3 carries, but for 76 yards and 2 touchdowns. Brian Herrien, 6 carries, 53 yards, 1 touchdown. Elijah Holyfield, 6 carries, 50 yards, 1 touchdown. DeAndre Swift, the only Georgia Bulldog who I think didn't have a rushing touchdown on the day, he still had 9 carries for 49 yards. And then, to top all of that off, a wide receiver, Tyler Simmons, gets in there, carries the ball 1 time, takes it 49 yards to the house. Why wouldn't he? Simmons also had 2 receptions for 81 yards and a touchdown. So, good on you. Have yourself a day, Simmons, Tyler Simmons. Mecole Hardman added 3 catches for 68 yards and a touchdown as well. Their tight end, Isaac Nwata, had 54-yard reception. Their running back, James Cook, added a 23-yard reception out of the backfield. Wide receiver, Terry Godwin, 2 catches for 16 yards. And Kevin Riley Ridley, 1 11-yard reception for a touchdown on the day. There we go. Now we're actually done with all the scores. And I have not overlooked anything. I don't think, but whatever. So in the polls, there's really no surprises going around for the most part. Alabama holding tight at number 1. In AP and coaches, Georgia at number 5. LSU is back up in the top 10. They're the number 9 team in the AP poll. Number 8 in the coaches poll, moving up 2 spots there. I guess they're technically tied for 8 in the AP poll. They have the same amount of AP votes as UCF, 1,064. So those 2 teams, I guess technically a tie for 8th place. The LSU is not in 9th place. So there you go. Florida, number 13 in both polls, moving up a few spots in both of those. Kentucky also moving up a little bit. 17 in the AP, 18 in the coaches poll. A lot of teams benefiting from some of the upsets that went down in the past week. West Virginia getting upset, Ohio State almost getting upset and dropping in the polls. So a lot of teams benefiting from that. Florida, Kentucky, and Mississippi State being the SEC teams that benefit. Mississippi State rounding things out in the top 25. They're up to number 22 in the AP poll, moving up 3 spots, up to number 20 in the coaches poll, up 3 spots as well. Texas A&M and Missouri, both receiving votes, and Auburn, all receiving votes in the AP poll. A&M receiving more coaches poll votes. Missouri, Auburn, South Carolina actually getting 1 coaches poll vote as well. The SEC Players of the Week for Week 12. Since there were only a few actual SEC matchups, I feel like that it gets skewed a little bit here. So you're going to see at least a couple of Mississippi State Bulldogs because they were one of the only SEC matchups going on here. But your Offensive Player of the Week was Drew Lock out of Missouri. A big-time road win and a Missouri Conference victory over Tennessee, completing 21 of 30 passes, 257 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. His second best his second best QB rating on the season, 163.96. 2 passes were dropped by his receivers in the end zone. That would have been touchdowns of 54 and 40 yards, which would have boosted his passing rating even higher. But most notable about all this is that the SEC official press release says it would have been much higher were it not for 2 drop passes by his receivers, which would have went for touchdowns of 54 and 40 yards. In case you're curious, Southeastern Conference, that's incorrect grammar, and you should be ashamed. Went is not the right word. Gone. I went. They would have gone. My goodness. Unbelievable. Missouri did put up 484 yards of total offense against Tennessee. 33-point victory was the largest by Missouri ever in an SEC road game in their long and storied SEC history. But with all this, Locke, of course, has moved into number 2 on the SEC career passing yardage list with 11,599 yards. He's number 3 in passing touchdowns with 94. I mean, just incredible what Locke has been able to do, even if this season has been, quote-unquote, a little bit rougher for him than what was expected. Just his career, unbelievable. 2 players are co-defensive players of the week. That's Jonathan Abram, the safety of Mississippi State, and Josh Pascal, the linebacker out of Kentucky. Abram had one of the best games ever by an MSU defensive back. 12 tackles, 7 solo, 1.5 sacks, 3.5 tackles for loss, a forced fumble, 2 quarterback hurries, 1 fumble recovery. He's the first MSU player to have 10-plus tackles and 3.5 tackles for a loss since All-American linebacker and Houston Texan Benardrick McKinney had 12 tackles and 3.5 tackles for loss against UAB in 2014. Abram, of course, being able to do that against a conference opponent. Abram is the leading tackler amongst all SEC defensive backs this season. 89 tackles on the season so far. Pascal is just one of the most impressive stories that you can have in all of college football right now. In July, he was diagnosed with malignant melanoma on the bottom of his right foot. He had 3 different surgeries, a bunch of immunotherapy treatments. This was his first time to play this season. All right, so in July, the man is diagnosed with cancer and has surgeries. Later, just a few months later, he comes in and plays this year. He started the game in a very emotional moment. He saw action throughout. In the second quarter, he had a tackle on a third down play, ended up forcing a punt. And when it was announced that it was him who was the tackler, standing ovation, teammates swarmed him. Just incredible to see him back out there. So he gets Defensive Player of the Week for the significance of what he's overcoming in his life. And that will always be much more important than a stupid sport like football. Great to see you back out there, JP. Keep on keeping on. He's just a sophomore. He'll be back for more action, and we hope the best for his health and success in the future. Special Teams Player of the Week is Luke Logan of Ole Miss. He connected on 5 for 5 on field goals in that overtime battle at Vanderbilt. He has hit 21 field goals this season. This is the third most all-time at Ole Miss in a single season. He's hit a field goal in 5 straight games, making 13 in the past 5 games. The freshman of the week in the SEC is quarterback Justin Fields at Georgia. 5 of 8 passing for 121 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 100 yards on the ground with a touchdown as well. That's the first time that a Georgia Bulldog quarterback has led the team in rushing since 2005. And it's the first time that a Georgia Bulldog quarterback has hit 100 yards rushing since Quincy Carter back in 1998. So there you go. Their offense put together 701 total yards, which is the second most in school history. The first being 713 yards against Florida Atlantic University back in 2012. Offensive lineman of the week was Deion Calhoun. Again, only a few actual SEC matchups, and so the league is going to give players of the week primarily to the teams that played against each other. So that's why there's so many Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, Missouri, and Mississippi State players listed here. But Deion Calhoun, the guard of Mississippi State, had one of the best games of his career, grading in at 86% and registering 2 knockdown blocks. The offensive line for the Bulldogs rushed for 287 yards and did not allow a sack on the day. In fact, according to Pro Football Focus, 102 of its 285 rushing yards. Wait a second, 285. They just said it was 287 in the sentence before this. Come on, SEC. Anyway, 102 rushing yards came directly to either side of Deion Calhoun. So he was paving the way there. Very, very nice. Defensive lineman of the week comes out of Vanderbilt, Deo Obeyingbo. The defensive lineman had 4 solo tackles and 2 sacks, helping the Commodores to that overtime victory against Ole Miss. He got to start next to his older brother, Dare Odeyingbo. I apologize for butchering those names. So that's really cool to see the 2 brothers starting on the defensive line together. Really, really impressive. His older brother, Dare, actually contributed 2 quarterback hurries and knocked down a pass. So that they had a heck of a game. Why aren't they both defensive linemen of the week? Just name them both. Anyway, Dio's first sack forced Ole Miss into a punt in its last possession of the first half, which of course then Vanderbilt was able to capitalize at the end of the first half. His second sack came actually within the 10-yard line and forced Ole Miss, trailing by 6 points at the time, into a field goal attempt, which frustrated ROTC co-founder Chandler Rowland quite a bit because what else are you playing for, Ole Miss? Why are you kicking field goals so much when you might as well go ahead and try to score as many touchdowns as possible? So there you go. Those are the players of the week, the polls, the stats throughout all the games. Since there was so much information, we're not going to go over the league leaders in this particular episode. It would take forever. So I'm going to wrap it up. I'm your friend Joseph Craven. This has been the numbers game for week 12. Looking forward to what will happen this week in Rivalry Week. That's right, I said it correctly this time.